Hey Alohomore fans, now before I get started, I have to put the obvious tag at the beginning here. Spoiler alert. You should know the story of Cursed Child at this point, especially if you're listening to Alohomore, but if you are still trying to hashtag keep the secrets, which obviously for this video I am not, you do not want to watch this video. I will give you my general view here at the beginning of the video, but definitely don't go past that point, because once we get into that, I'm going to go into details about the characters, the acting, the plot twists, and the special effects. I will be holding nothing back. Hashtag keep the secrets is no longer relevant to me. With that said, enjoy. Okay, yes, so welcome Alohomore listeners to this review you've been waiting for quite a long time. I did see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child at the Lyric Theater in New York City this past September of 2018. The big reveal, did I like it or not? I think it was Joan of Arc who once said, "Guess the what? No!" Yeah, that was definitely Joan of Arc. Whatever. No. I didn't really like it. There's a bit of a caveat with that. I did not like the story. No, the story still sucks. It's awful. It is very badly written. But I did like the theatricality and the experience. Does that excuse the story being bad? No, absolutely not. It should have been a way better story. I have seen many a theatrical production that has a much better marriage of stagecraft, acting, and writing. So I know you guys were hoping that after seeing the play acted out with professionals and with all of the effects kind of surrounding it, that I would have this big epiphany about the story and realize that it was actually good, but no! I appreciate those of you who were hoping that I would actually get some enjoyment out of it, and I did, but just not as far as the story goes. The story was horrendous. Just to clarify, I did go to the show with my two roommates, Jera and Leandra. Jera had read the script once after it came out, and she did not read it again, so she didn't remember very much about it. Leandra did not read the script, but had just come off of a fresh reread of the original 7 books, plus the extra canonical material. I even had her read all of the Pottermore material that I knew would be relevant. As far as how the three of us came out of it, generally pretty much the same. There were a few minor things that we each saw a little differently. Most of that was related to the acting, but for the most part, we all three did not enjoy the story. I thought that was especially indicative of the quality, considering that Leandra had not even read it and none of the twists fazed her. Leandra turned to me at the end of every act and just kind of went, "Why?"
What do you think so far?
Ooh. Now this video is not a complete ripping apart of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. There were things I did enjoy, so let's get into that a little bit. First, the Lyric Theater. Beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful theaters I've had the chance to be in New York City, or just in general. It has all been themed after Harry Potter, but with kind of a light theming so that if someday another show moves in there, it will easily be able to fit in and they won't have to make grandiose adjustments. But the real lovely touches, including the kind of the Hogwarts wallpaper, the sconces, and the paintings of the stars on the ceilings, it was very beautiful. Stephanie Norton in Dumbledore's office asked, how were my seats? So yes, thank you for asking. Actually, our seats were very nice. They were in what is called the dress circle. The dress circle is the balcony that is right in between the balcony and the orchestra seating. So we were kind of smack dab in the middle. We had just a straight shot view to the stage. We could see everything. The only disadvantage to that was that we didn't have binoculars, which I definitely regretted not buying and bringing with us because we couldn't see the actors' faces. But I mean, I was pretty familiar with the actors already, so that wasn't a big problem, but I would highly recommend, if you are going, make sure to bring some binoculars with you if you're seated in the dress circle. The merchandise. Obviously, I liked it because I got some of it. I tended to go towards things that weren't Cursed Child specific, since I didn't actually like the play itself, but I liked its aesthetic that it made for Harry Potter and for Hogwarts especially. So I did get these nice little letters with like fake wax seals that you can put on them. And of course, I got Hufflepuff merchandise. I got a Hufflepuff pin and a Hufflepuff tote bag. And I love this because, you know, it's got the badger kind of hidden in the H. It's a very modernized look for the logos. You get 2 show bills. You get one for part 1 and one for part 2, and they go together and make the augury wings. No, there is nothing different about either one of them unless your cast changes between parts, which will more likely happen if you see the show on 2 different nights, but I saw it on Wednesday, so my cast luckily did not change in between. There is also a very helpful, ridiculously extensive timeline that summarizes all the stuff from Harry Potter as best it can, but at the very bottom it does have terms that are going to be important, but if you're a fan, they're going to give away exactly what's in the play. There's also a really interesting article in here that's in the back that you might miss if you're just kind of glancing through. It's by Dr. Shirley Gracias, and it's called Harry Potter, the Boy Protected by His Mother's Love. It's really interesting. It's kind of got some stuff that relates to Lumos, so that's really cool that they put that in there. You'll also notice that I've got a program back here. We'll get to that in a little bit. There was also a really fancy vegan leather bag that I really wanted, but the small one was $50 and the large one was $100. And actually, with what I purchased, that was all $50 on its own. So no, I wasn't gonna buy the fancy bag, but it was really cool. Also, if you want Albus and Scorpius's wands, for some reason, they have those for you. The VIP experience. So as those of you who follow me on social media know, I paid way too much money to see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. And that was because not only was I taking 2 people with me, but I figured since we were going all the way to New York to see this show, I wanted to get good seats for it. That was just my personal way of doing it. I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to theater and film as far as where I sit. And in this case, I really didn't want to have a subpar experience. So I shelled out the mega dough for this play. They scan your ticket and then they send you back to the lounge. You go through this curtain and down these really long steps to this hidden little room below the Lyric Theater, and it's basically like your little common room that you get to hang out in. At the beginning of every part, you get free champagne. There is a delicious banquet of finger foods for you. It tasted delicious. How's the food?
It's good.
Yeah?
Strawberry salad's good.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't get salad. Oh, I'm gonna go back and get salad. And the staff there was really, really nice. I think his name was Aramond or Aramonde, and the woman's name was Andrea. Aramond was a Ravenclaw and Andrea was a Slytherin, and they were so great. I was so excited that they were there for the whole thing. They were just the nicest people, and if you do the VIP experience, I hope they are your staff when you go. If you see them, let them know that the guy that they helped out with the rainbow hair and the Hufflepuff uniform says hi. So with that high-tiered price for the VIP experience, not only do you get food and drinks, but you get a program rolled in, and they even tell you when you go upstairs, don't buy the program because we're going to give you one at the very end of the show. This program is beautiful. It's got lots of nice large pictures of stuff from the show and essays from different crew members. If you have the extra money to get this, if you haven't done the VIP experience, I highly recommend it because the essays are really interesting, and it's a nicer thing to have on your shelf that you might be able to get signed by the cast after the show. But if you're not willing to shell out the money for that, don't worry, you've got your show bills that you can have them signed to. Honestly, the VIP experience was kind of what made the whole thing more tolerable. The lounge is clearly not something that a lot of people in the 20-something age range are able to do. If you're making a big thing out of going to see Cursed Child, I would say splurge and do it, because especially if you don't like the story already, it's not really going to help you to enjoy it by seeing it, but the VIP experience does make it feel all a little bit better. That said, if you don't have the money to do it, please don't. Be practical with your money. Do not waste all your money on Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Okay, so that's all the aesthetic stuff and fun stuff with the theater, but what about the play? Let's talk about one of my favorite things, the special effects. Holy moly, they were mind-blowing. There are a bunch of stagecraft effects going on there that I had no idea how they did. Jera was having a really fun time because she watches a lot of shows about magic, and so she thought she knew how some of the stuff was being done, but even she was a little bit stumped on a few things. The show opens with a bang with a lovely special effect when they go through the wall of platform 9 3/4. There is no wall. It's all done very theatrically. They actually run forward, everybody spins around, and their muggle clothes become Hogwarts robes. One of my favorite effects was actually something that is not in the script. The script has a different version of how it's done. When they go into the telephone booth to get to the ministry or leave the ministry, the really neat thing is they put a cloak on and they walk into the booth, and then they disappear and the cloaks actually get sucked into the telephone. The effect that a lot of people were wondering about was the time turner. It is astonishing, and it happens multiple times, of course, thanks to the overuse of the time turner in this play. What it looks like is essentially a sonic boom. Boom! Boom! Whenever the time turner effect hits, the whole stage just ripples in front of you. Jarrow was pretty sure they did it with lighting effects, and it's also combined with, I believe there are 20 speakers in the theater, so they put a huge boom of bass as it happens, and so it just makes you almost feel the effect. It was amazing. Andrew Hall, or @PewterWolf on Twitter, one of our longtime listeners, had a few questions about some other effects in the play. The Dementors are people. They are people in translucent fabric that are on wires, and not only are they flying above the stage, there is one Dementor that comes flying above the audience, and they start over the orchestra and then drift up to the dress circle and then upwards to the balcony, and they kind of come right in front of the front row of people who are there. So that's pretty wild. I do not envy that actor who has to do that every day, because that's quite a feat. The underwater scene, interestingly, was exactly how I pictured it in my head. A screen comes down to kind of amplify the effect. It's shaped like a giant eye, so it's kind of like you're looking through into the lake, and it gives that shimmery effect. And there are also some additional effects with Harry, Fleur, and Crumb shooting through the water. You see like a whoosh of a spark go by as they dive in. And of course, the actors are on wires, but the way that they're tumbling around, it's mostly just their acting that sells it. There are a lot of other effects in the play. Overall, they were very successful. A few of them fell flat, but for the most part, they were very impressive, and they are kind of what makes the show. Another big favorite piece for me that I really didn't have any qualms with and just overall really enjoyed: the soundtrack. So from reading some articles online and from reading my program, I found out that Imogen Heap really didn't know much about Harry Potter. She hadn't seen all of the movies and had not read the books, so she wasn't even that familiar with John Williams' score, and that serves her really well here. Most of the compositions are just pieces that she had already written. They've just been turned into instrumentals and rearranged a little bit. It's a huge benefit that Heap had no familiarity with John Williams' score, because she just did her own thing. It works really well. It's very ethereal. It definitely fits with the world of Harry Potter very nicely.
It doesn't have any like lyrics in it apart from one bit. It's really like an explosion of instrumental music with loads of vocals, and it's really, really dynamic.
I was thrilled when I got home to find out that they will be releasing the soundtrack in early November, so definitely keep an eye out for that. I guess what she did was she strung all of the pieces into 4 kind of compositions, but you can also look up online just Imogen Heap Cursed Child, and people will have made lists of all of her existing pieces, and there are even instrumentals of them already that you can listen to.
The music from the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child play is going to be released on the 2nd of November. Hooray!
The transitions. All of the transitions are matched up to Imogen Heap's music, and they are so effective. I've never seen such gorgeous transitions in a stage play. The other neat thing about them is that they are all done with dance. This is not in the script at all. The script completely fails to express how the transitions are done. My favorite moment by far, which isn't as much of a transition as it is a story point, is when the Hogwarts students are learning how to do Lumos in Act 1 of Part 1, and they do a dance to a piece that you've probably heard in a lot of the promotional material for Cursed Child. I believe it's called The Cycle, and it's a rearranged version of that piece from Heap, and it just totally caught my attention. It really, I was just drawn in. I was at the edge of my seat watching these actors perform this beautiful piece of work. It was a really neat way to evoke the wand work of Harry Potter in such a different way that really can only be done on stage. The other one that was a true transition was the opening to Act 2, Part 1, with the Death Eater takeover and the augury timeline. Watching the Death Eaters kind of stomp around to a piece that I believe was called Minds Without Fear. Super cool. They even have a part where the Death Eaters kind of apparate in this kind of triangle formation. It was really cool. And you would think that swishing of the cloaks would just be silly, but the way that they time it and just the intensity with which they do it is very impressive. Even the opening scene is extremely charming. It has the Sorting Hat is kind of a character that drifts through the show, and he's kind of like the prop master. He's actually the character that opens the show by coming out and putting his hat on. It's just floating in midair on the stage, and he comes in. When he puts it on, all of the Hogwarts students come out and start dancing around with their luggage, and it's beautiful. There's a real beauty to the movement of the transition scenes. I just wish that beauty had transcended into the script. And lastly, one of the few story points I can give a point to, but I have already talked about this on the episodes about Cursed Child, the Dumbledore-Harry scenes. They played out exactly as I heard them and saw them in my head. They are very good quality scenes that seem to speak to larger themes that the play is trying to address, and they do it, I'd say, the most successfully out of most of the dialogue and scenes, mostly because they do what Rowling does with magic, which is they use the magic as a metaphor for what is going on in the story. Most of the magic and occurrences in the rest of the play don't do that. They just do it to be showy. Yep, okay, I know that was a short list of things I liked, but sorry, that's all I like. Time to move on to the mixed feelings. Okay, so these are things that I was kind of neither here nor there about, or like not extremely one way or the other, just kind of meh in the middle. So Madeline Corzine on Facebook and AbbyJane12 on Twitter both asked a very similar question, which was essentially, after seeing the play, did that change my feelings on the story? Did that really affect my feelings on the play as a whole? It's kind of a mix, and I've explained this a little bit already. Basically, I feel like there is a divorce between the story and the stagecraft. There is some beautiful stuff going on with the stage work, with the set and the effects, but the story is not holding that up. It's kind of just in the background where the effects and the set and the props and even some of the acting are overtaking the actual story, and that doesn't really work for me. So it doesn't really change my opinion on the story, but I do see the value in putting Potter on stage, not necessarily in this way. I don't think this was the best way to do it. I don't think this was like the winning formula that you might be looking for in a Potter story, but it's a start. My Speak Beastie co-host Haley Lewis asked, did you feel that some characters were portrayed differently in the script versus the show? What we're gonna do is I'm gonna talk to you about these guys in what I would like to call acting superlatives. The acting superlatives will be a mix of both the acting and the character and their function in the story, because I was pretty much mixed on all of them. So the first one that probably the majority of you were wondering about my reaction to, most likely to make you go, what the Scorpius Malfoy. I'm sorry guys, I know a lot of you were hoping that I would really like Scorpius after seeing his character on stage versus the script, because as you know, I do not like Scorpius on paper. He's just, to me, an avatar for Potter readers, especially like extreme Potter fans who are like on Tumblr every day squeeing and sharing all of their fandom, which, don't get me wrong, there is definitely a space for that. It's Tumblr. I don't hang out there because of that, because that just doesn't work for me. Not only does Scorpius very much fulfill that role in the show, but Anthony Boyle made a choice, a very strong acting choice, but a choice nonetheless to basically scream everything that Scorpius says. SNL recently did a skit where Matt Damon played Brett Kavanaugh, and I feel like he properly describes how Anthony Boyle approached the role.
I'm gonna start at an 11. I'm gonna take it to about a 15 real quick.
So there's a line in the script, it's in part 2, act 1, after Albus and Scorpius get back from being in the augury timeline, and Scorpius is so excited to see everybody, and in the script it just says he's overjoyed. And his line is, Harry, it's Harry Potter, and Ginny, and Professor McGonagall, and Dad, my dad. Hi, Dad. And the way that Anthony Boyle reads it is, Harry! It's Harry Potter! And Ginny! Professor McGonagall! I can't even get through it. That is how he reads it. He actually reminded me a lot of Lemongrab from Adventure Time.
You really smell like dog blood.
Jara pointed out a very valid thing about Scorpius, and this was one of the things that she and I disagreed on. She loved Scorpius for the most part, unquestioningly, as far as his portrayal. And she said that his voice she thought was a good decision because on paper he's not a very strong character, but with the voice, he does kind of overtake the show. I think that's very true. For me, it was super distracting because, again, he starts at a 10 and he takes it to like a 20 whenever he actually does have to be overexcited or overjoyed or scream. There was just spit flying on the scene where we could actually see it in the scene where he yells at Albus, which was a very great scene, but at the same time, oh my gosh, it was so intense. So no, I'm not a new Scorpius fan, but I get why people like him. In tandem with that, because I don't have a superlative for him, is Draco. The only notable thing about Draco is that Alex Price's performance is probably partially in tandem to blame for Anthony Boyle's performance. They seem to have worked together to develop their voices because Alex Price also is putting on this very gruff kind of voice for Malfoy, which again I'm not a fan of. I don't know why none of the Malfoys can ever read in the original description that Malfoy speaks with a low drawl, so he always sounds bored, but nobody ever performs him like that.
Did someone say Draco Malfoy?
And Alex Price just goes full in with this very gravelly, gruff voice, which he drops when he's not being angry, and just kind of does a normal voice, and Scorpius does the same thing. So they must have worked on that together. Again, it's a choice. I see why they did it. They built that from the ground up, and kudos to them, but it didn't work for me. Most like their book counterpart, Ron. Paul Thornley perfectly conveys Ron. I believed him the whole time. I believed he was grown-up Ron. Ron doesn't have anything to do in the show, so that's a shame, but he's really good at playing him. Most unlike their book counterpart, Hermione. Yeah, this one really kills me because I wanted Noma's performance to just blow me away, and it did not. That said, I would never take back her casting. If you've watched the video of her on the Cursed Child YouTube page talking about the importance of this role and the importance of Hermione being portrayed as black, I wouldn't take that back from her for the world.
What does it mean for me to be on Broadway? It's expectations. How you grow up. The representation I was given didn't have me in the picture. I want to burst out into tears because I am. Sorry, guys. I am on Broadway.
If you didn't cry at that, you're a heartless monster. There's really nothing that I can see, not only from the movies, but definitely not from the books, in her portrayal. To me, it was very similar to what I felt was a huge miscasting with Alfre Woodard as Aunt Josephine in the series of unfortunate events. Maybe that's just some choices that they made, or maybe they just weren't a good fit for the role. I would love to see other Hermiones in that role, and I'm glad I got to see Noma. Side note, I had a really cool moment with her. While I was waiting in line to get back in for Act 2, we were actually at the back door, and she came out of a side door to take a call, and I was pretty sure I was like the only person who actually noticed that it was her, because she was just in her regular clothes, and I definitely made this face at her. She kind of looked at me with a face that was just like, cool, I get that you're excited and I appreciate your excitement, but also keep it all inside. So I did. I did not like point at her and be like, oh my god, it's Hermione. Don't do that. If you're ever at a theater show and an actor is in between acts, You can do it after at the stage door at the end, but don't do that in between or when you just see them walking around. Don't do that. I also hope that because of this casting decision that it's not like a one-off where it's just that the play only casts Black Hermione and then everybody else is white. I would love to see that open up to the possibility that actors of other nationalities could play the other characters, because literally the nationalities of the characters and their cultural backgrounds have no bearing on the plot. Noma, I'm so sorry if you ever watch this. It is not a knock on you. You are a wonderful actress. All the love to you. Most like the movie. Ty, Myrtle, and Voldemort. And yes, they do say Voldemort. They're trying to bring that back, kind of like I am. But it's never going to happen. It's too late. The movie's overpowered that. The actress who plays Myrtle, interestingly, is the same actress who plays Lily Potter in the final scenes of the show. They could not be more different characters. I guess the relation is that they're both dead. But yes, Myrtle's performance is exactly the movie down to a T. She is totally chewing the scenery, but unlike Scorpius, it's not as distracting. It's really fun. It's, again, kind of excessive because she's really just there, like many of the characters, to say they went that way. Voldemort is also exactly like the movie. He even has, he's missing his nose. They make a joke about that with Rose earlier in the play, which is funny. He looks exactly like the movie. He sounds exactly like the movie. And he functions about as importantly as the movie, where he comes in and then he comes out. Most not like the movie, Snape. So the actor who plays Snape is named Byron Jennings. He's fine. He seems to have actively made the choice to not do Alan Rickman's Snape, and that's probably a good thing because that performance is so iconic. But when you make that choice, your other choice is basically to not do Alan Rickman, and so he just plays the role with nothing to make Snape really stand out in any way, which in a way is kind of a shame because Snape is there for a pretty long time and has a lot of lines, but it's just weird because he's just talking and acting like a normal guy. Most improved from the page to the screen. It's another tie between Ginny and, yes, Rose. I'll talk about Rose first because she's not in the play very much, and that's a shame. She's kind of the new Ginny in that way, where I do smash my Thor cup and I say, another! Rose is there just to function as a no-homo between Albus and Scorpius, and don't you worry, I will get to that. Which is a shame, because she actually is quite likable on the stage, except for the fact that she is obsessed with her popularity, and so that's kind of the thing I think that's supposed to set her apart from Hermione, and also what drives a wedge between her and Albus, but also makes her a non-functioning character in the play by a certain point. There's a lovely scene when they get back from the augury timeline where she's actually listening in with a bunch of Hogwarts students to all the stuff that's being said in McGonagall's office, and she actually comes and hugs Hermione, and it's a very sweet scene. It seems clear that she was in some draft somewhere supposed to go with Albus and Scorpius because they bothered to develop her character in the first act, but then they just throw her out of the story after that and she's not important anymore. Ginny was probably the biggest surprise for me because she comes off so much better on stage than she does on the page. On the page, I felt like Ginny was a bit of a nag who was just getting at Harry for being an incompetent father, or at least what she viewed as an incompetent father, and then not helping him at all, even though she clearly has a very good relationship with her children. However, on the stage, Poppy Miller's performance works so well with Jamie's performance, and the two of them have wonderful chemistry. I mean, to be fair, the bar is very low when you're coming from Bonnie Wright and Daniel Radcliffe. What really sends her relationship with Harry over the top is how physical they are with each other. They just hold on to each other a lot during the play. And of course, that's not conveyed in the script. That's an actor's choice. Ginny has a lot of great moments in the show. One of the best ones that I didn't remember because it's probably not described this way in the script from what I recall, but she yells at Draco. She yells right to his face when he says that he's missing a child. And she says, I am too! And she gets right in his face and screams it as loud as she can. It's very enjoyable. A few of the things with Ginny still bother me. She starts relating to Draco about how they left her out of all their fun at school. I don't like that, especially because Harry wouldn't consider the things he got into fun. But other than that, it's kind of cool to see Ginny finally being somewhat appreciated. Most pointless character, Albus. Now, this is something I'm really not looking forward to hearing about from Allison, but I know she's going to hold this over my head. My performance did not have Sam Clement. He was the only actor who was switched out. Everybody else was the same cast except for him. I got an understudy. His name was James Romney, and he was perfectly competent in the role. I really can't imagine that Sam changes the role drastically from the way that James played it. It's possible. As I mentioned earlier with Scorpius, actors make very clear decisions that really do help sometimes a lackluster character stand out a little more. But Albus really is just there to be a whiny little brat and make the story points happen. So, meh. I actually felt on stage, and it's possibly due to Scorpius's performance, that Albus feels like less of an entity on stage than he does on the page. He's not really doing much in his scenes. He doesn't get the bulk of the lines. Even in his scenes with Harry, he seems to talk less than Harry. And this serves to address a larger issue that I have with the play, that the play theoretically should be Albus's story, but it really wants to be Scorpius's story, and it kind of just ends up getting torn between the two and not completing either of their story arcs properly. Most melodramatic. Harry Potter. Jamie Parker is not doing a bad job as Harry. It is mostly the script. Everybody is being pretty melodramatic in this play because that is how it is written. This is the most melodramatic, over-the-top story that the Harry Potter universe has produced, and the acting has to kind of match up to that. And so Parker is playing Harry the way he is written. There's not much of a trace of original Harry that I see. I saw it in one scene really distinctly, and then I didn't really see it again. The scene where Harry and Hermione are in Harry's office at the Ministry is very much original Harry. He's kind of laid back, ignoring his work and telling Hermione he'll get it done later, and there's a dynamic there that just fits. And from Jamie, it's especially sounding like Harry, but he doesn't really play that side of Harry again in the play because Harry is just so put upon and beleaguered throughout the rest of the story. Pretty much just spends the whole time chasing down his stupid son who can't get his shit together. We'll get more into Harry's stuff in the stuff that I didn't like, but that's not Jamie's fault, that's the story's fault. But he's fine. He looks like Harry. It was kind of cool to see him after all this time because I've seen videos of Jamie. I've watched him sing on YouTube. He's a very talented actor. I could tell that by watching him, but he's not my Harry. Most theatrical. Hagrid. Hagrid has no point in being in the play. He shouldn't be there. If he is there, he should be there in the current timeline, not in all these dumb flashbacks, because they serve no point to the story. But it's cool to see him on stage, because considering that they had to go through a lot of special effects hoops to get Hagrid on to the screen by having like an actor double for Robbie Coltrane when they had full-size shots of him. The fact that they can just have this actor stomp onto the stage and play Hagrid, and he's tall, is very impressive. Here's another thing that I actually had mixed feelings about, and I said I was going to come back to. Pewter Wolf, or Andrew Hall, on Twitter also asked me about the LGBTQIA plus themes as far as they related to Albus and Scorpius. So this does not invalidate my reading of the play, because the play's script definitely could be interpreted this way. I do not think that Scorpius is portrayed as gay, but it's mostly because the play aggressively reminds us that he likes Rose, not for any good reason, because she hates him, and she only even starts to come around at the end, in that kind of wear her down trope way that I don't like. The scene when Delphi is teaching Albus how to do Expelliarmus, and he shows up in the back, and I couldn't even see his expression in the script. There's that whole piece where it's like he sees his friend, and part of him likes it and part of him doesn't. And I couldn't even see that in the performance. So it's not really there. Interestingly, despite the fact that Scorpius doesn't really show it as much in the play, he has a whole scene when he's talking to Delphi on a staircase in an alternate timeline, and she's just like, you need him. And she pretty much goes on and on about how just like Albus is the one for Scorpius, and he takes that to heart. So the other characters seem to see something that the characters themselves maybe do not. That said, Albus is pretty gay for Scorpius. There is definitely a spark from Albus's side. His relationship with Delphi just isn't developed very well in the play, mostly because Delphi isn't there for most of it. And yes, in answer to the question on a lot of your lips, the staircase scene is super gay. It is very, very much showing this longing that does not just appear to be between friends, and it's coming from both sides in that particular scene. At the end, they do meet each other, and I think either at the bottom or the top of the staircase, and the spotlight's on them, and the music is very kind of like tiptoey, dreamy, sweet. And yeah, it's gay. So those are the things I felt mixed about. Now on to the stuff that I just did not like. At Near Intelligent asked if seeing the play changed my thoughts on the story. No, the story is crap. There are so many plot holes in the story. The 19 years later scene, just, I can't get over it because it's so different. There are so many characters that are pulled out of the story that definitely would have been involved. There's a lot of cheap emotion in the story just to get you to react, which the audience did in droves. But it's not a good story, so no, seeing it didn't change anything really in that respect for me. Maybe I found a few new layers with some of the characters, but overall the story is still very disappointing. It all feels like fan fiction that's being put on stage. I just can't get over the 19 years later thing. It completely changes that moment in the story just to get the story out of the play that it wants. The lazy passage of time, even though it's pretty with all the transitions and the dancing that I liked, it doesn't leave room for what's necessary, which is more time between Albus and Harry, if that's the conflict that the show wants to develop. I barely saw it, and it just doesn't strike me as believable because James and Lily are kind of around in the background, and Harry is having a perfectly great time with them. He even says at one point that he wishes Albus was more like them. So there's a weird thing with Harry questioning how good of a parent he is, but also like clearly he knows how to be a good parent. At the end of the show, Harry basically says like, I didn't have a father figure, so I don't know how to be a dad. And that's a weird thing for him to say, again, considering that he's perfectly fine as a dad to two other children, and then he just can't get it with Albus. The play is also really aggressively interested in everybody just demeaning Harry and telling him that his great accomplishments weren't so great. It sounds like the way they treat him, like Harry is very egotistical and has a big head about all of his accomplishments, but he doesn't. He clearly still has a lot of animosity and hate for all of that stuff that happened to him, and a lot of trauma from it too. So it's kind of weird that the characters are always just kind of like, yeah, kind of bring it down, Harry. Like, we're here to ground you. The one thing that Harry's bad at is that he cites all of his experiences at Hogwarts in a way that he thinks might be relatable to Albus, and it's clear that he's a bit incompetent when it comes to that, and that Albus doesn't find that what the comfort in that he needs. It's not for want of trying. Harry flat out asks Albus what's wrong. He even pinpoints exactly what's wrong when he asks if the other students are being mean to him, and Albus just chooses not to respond. So honestly, I think Harry's doing a great job as a dad, and all of the stuff that happens with the Marauders map and that timeline is an alternate timeline that doesn't contribute to Harry's character or attitude, so I can't really say that that's a part of who he is. That was another big problem with the play, was the timeline stuff, because it just starts to blend together after a while, and the play doesn't really even want to keep track of that. At one point, after they get back to the normal timeline out of the augury timeline, Harry mentions to Albus that he put the map away, so he's never going to see it again. And I was just like, but he never took it out in that timeline. So I'm assuming that that's the implication, is that they told him what happened in the timeline, but it just doesn't really make sense that they would mention that. I think the only thing with that is it's supposed to build up to the extra canonical information that James sneaks into Harry's office and gets the map from him. So now James has the map and the invisibility cloak, and Albus has a blanket. Speaking of timelines, the augury timeline is the worst timeline, and it is just too long, and it should be cut from the play. Grace Candido on Twitter, or as you guys know her better, Lord Trolldemore, on our forums and website, asked how impressive is the Death Eater spectacle, and should I go see this play? Well, I mean, it's cool for that transition scene at the beginning when you see the Death Eaters marching around to the Imogen Heap music, but other than that, no, they don't really do anything. Rosie told me in one of our episodes that Cedric is the one who's leading that parade of Death Eaters. In the US production, it is not Cedric, and I definitely know it wasn't him, because the actor who was leading the procession was black, and the actor playing Cedric was very, very white and blonde. I didn't even really recall seeing Cedric in those Death Eaters, so it's, again, still weird that they bring Cedric up, but don't show him as one of the Death Eaters. If they did, I missed it, and it wasn't significant enough for me to even notice it. The augury timeline goes on too long. It doesn't develop anybody except Scorpius, and it's not his story. Again, the play really wants to be his story. It's spending time on developing his relationship with Draco, and the two of them are definitely secondary characters, kind of in their own plot cul-de-sac, like Hermione and Ron, who are just there to validate that they should be together. But that doesn't really serve what's going on with Harry and Albus. It's supposed to be kind of a mirror to them, but it's not as good. The scene where Draco talks to Scorpius is just full of these bizarre, nonsensical platitudes where they're talking about who people are and who they grow up to be and choices that are made, but it's not as good or very as well written as Rowling's words, and it doesn't really matter in the end, because maybe Scorpius grows from that, but Draco does not, because he does not experience that in the normal timeline. The only change that Draco makes is that he kind of talks his feelings out with Harry a little bit, kind of very begrudgingly, and then he gives Scorpius a hug, and that's the end of their story. They are there for the end of the play, but they are inconsequential to the end of the play. The augury timeline is also a space to just be super apologist to lots of characters, which is another thing that I've talked about that I hate about the play. Having Snape there is gratuitous and pointless. Having the relationship with Ron and Hermione kind of hammered in is gratuitous and pointless. Having Umbridge there is just fan service, because you get to see her get depulsoed, which really, I don't know why people were so satisfied by that. It's not satisfying, but people really liked it in the audience. People cheered and got really happy when she got kicked off the stage, and I swear that's the only reason she's there. She doesn't have any effectiveness whatsoever. She doesn't do anything. She's not very powerful. She's shown to be powerful, but then Snape just hits her with a depulso spell and she's done. She even says at one point to Snape, when he asks her how long she's suspected that he's been a double agent, she's like, a long time, and I'm like, then why didn't you do something about it? Because Dumbledore's not in the way in this timeline. Harry's not even in the way, so what's really to stop her from going after Snape? There is nobody who seems to have an invested interest in him. He doesn't seem to have any valuable information for her at this point, because she just gives him up to the Dementors, so I don't understand why she didn't go after him sooner. It didn't really seem valuable to keep him around. The Trolley Witch. This is something that a lot of us in the Potter fandom have a problem with, and yes, it is not good. It is very bizarre. The whole scene just doesn't fit. It's probably one of the laziest of the special effects. It's literally just this like long tall table with like with like arches, and there's like a long red tablecloth covering it, and I guess that's supposed to be the top of the Hogwarts Express. They scream the whole scene. The scene lasts way too long. It's just Albus and Scorpius screaming at each other. You can't understand anything they're saying. The Trolley Witch shows up. Her part is completely superfluous and idiotic, and doesn't even work. She's shown to be this huge threat, and then she doesn't do anything. They even additionally build it up by saying that she stopped Fred and George and the Marauders, but she can't stop these two. All they do is jump off the train and use a cushioning charm. I'm sure the Marauders and Fred and George would have tried something similar, so I can't imagine why she was able to stop them, because literally all she does is stand there, and then her fingers grow longer. She does throw pumpkin pasty bombs at them, but she throws like one and it goes poof, and that's it. And then somebody takes her card away, so she doesn't even have that as a weapon. And really, like, once her fingers grow, she is just standing there menacingly for about 5 minutes as the stage just goes around and around in a circle and she doesn't do anything. It's pointless. It's purely there for special effects wow, and to be like, look at this character that you thought was a background character. Guess what? She's a horrible evil monster. Dream and the memory sequences. I wanted to talk about these because, again, they are really pretty, but they are very pointless and they don't serve anything in the plot. These still seem to feel like leftovers from a different version of the play, and really all they do is allow you to see Harry as a young man again and as a young boy, and the Dursleys, because I guess you want to see them. All of this just leads up to Harry having revelations about where Albus is. That's where all of these dreams go. They end up just like having Albus pop out at the end and the rest of the dream falling apart. I guess it's supposed to speak to the deep trauma that Harry has over his childhood, but it doesn't really ever come up as far as why Harry needs to deal with it, especially because it's not terribly directly related to Harry's stuff with his parents. They get mentioned in that scene when Harry goes to the graveyard with Aunt Petunia that apparently did not happen in real life. So I guess that's starting to touch on that theme that Harry is still hung up on the death of his parents, but the other scenes with the Dursleys and Hagrid they don't serve any purpose. They're very weird to include. At Pewter Wolf, again, Andrew Hall asked about some of the twists in the play, including the twist that Neville was killed by Cedric Diggory in the Augury timeline and that Delphi is Voldemort's daughter. The twists did absolutely nothing for me, obviously, because I'd already read the book, and I don't think they would have done anything for me if I hadn't read the book. They probably would have made me go, huh? Leandra hadn't read the script, and she had the exact reaction to that. She thought that the Voldemort Delphi reveal was very lazy. The thing was, though, I can see why they put those things, because as we talked about on the episodes about Cursed Child, that is an easy, cheap way to get gasps out of people, and it worked like a charm. I swear the three of us were the only people not reacting to that. The whole audience, just the intake of breath on all of the twists was just ridiculous. I think even some people afterwards who had gasped at the twist still were just like, why did I gasp at that? Because again, I heard a lot of people picking the play apart and critiquing it, so not everybody bought it, but the twists don't do anything for me because they feel like lazy fan fiction twists. Delphi as a whole is a character that I don't like. Like, her actress was perfectly serviceable in the role. Her British accent was very convincing, considering that she was an American actress. She's obviously the villain. She's the only new character that's introduced that has any substantive amount of time on the stage. She is very much supposed to be a Tonks callback. She has ripped up jeans, she has dyed hair and a ponytail, a jean jacket. Definitely a misleading character, and so obvious that you kind of see it from the get-go. Just like Umbridge, they really build her up, and they do in the show. They really build her up to be this big thing, and then she ends up being nothing. She colloportuses the doors closed in the church so that the others can't get in, and it's just it's just Harry and Albus against her. God, I wish it was just Ginny and Albus. That would be cool. And they don't do anything to her. They just shoot Incendio at her like twice, and it doesn't work. And then Harry just uses Alohomora on the doors, and they open. I don't know why the others couldn't do that on the other side, but he just uses Alohomora. They all come in, they shoot Incendio at her, and she just comes down. And then they brachiobindo and throw her up into the rafters of the church, and that's the last we see of her. The biggest problem, as Katie mentioned in her video, is yes, they added in a line, and it is said by Ron. Katie, I know you were trying to figure out if it was Ron or Harry. It's Ron. Ron calls her the ultimate Horcrux. That adds on so many layers of problems to the story that I don't think I need to even go into it for you, the Harry Potter experts out there. It clearly is just, to me, another cheap thing that for an audience that may not know a lot about Harry Potter can go, oh yeah, Horcruxes, I know what those are.
A Horcrux? I beg your pardon?
But they don't have to know like the full details, and therefore don't really have to think about it, because if you do think about it, it pretty much just breaks the whole story. Everything about Harry Potter breaks. It's funny because I think they added that explanation in to like simplify things and make it like, oh, this is easier, this is more digestible, but actually no, it adds on so many more layers that you're like, nope. At Rhetoric Sleuth on Twitter asked, the scene where Harry watches his parents die, the stage performance moved me more than the books and films. Did you feel similar? No.
No!
The three of us were, again, probably the only people not reacting to the scene. We all found it super gratuitous. I still believe that it is in antithesis to the morals and ideas of the play, because the play is very much trying to get across that Harry needs to let go of his past and move on. And it would have probably been more effective if he had invested in Albus and been like, you know what, Albus, this is about you, not about me. Let's go. But no, they stand there and they watch, and it's grotesque and awful and excessive, and it's clearly one of those things that's just supposed to make you cry. And no, it didn't make me cry more than when I read about it in the books. I don't really cry at that scene in the books, especially the full reenactment that we get of it from Deathly Hallows when we see what happens through Voldemort's eyes. The thing that makes me cry in the Harry Potter universe when it talks about Lily and James is when Harry goes to their graveyard and realizes that they are dead in the ground and that they are not going to be able to help him. He needs to finally realize that no, his parents aren't going to be alive and walk him through everything. Like, nothing's going to happen to bring them back. And that scene is where he realizes that. Adding this into that, add more of Harry is Harry is still thinking about his dead parents and can't get over it. Like, I'm not saying that that grief won't stay with you forever, but it just doesn't work to have him revisit that again. He's done it so many times throughout the series, and it's clear that he has overcome that need to revisit it. That's what the whole thing, the Dementors in Prisoner of Azkaban is about.
Feeling sentimental.
The play is full of that kind of cheap emotional manipulation. Again, like I said before, there are multiple scenes with twists that make you go, and as Pewter Wolf asked about the Neville twist, that was one of those, and it's just so pointless, but it makes you go, because you know who Neville is, and the idea that he is dead is shocking, but not really, because there are multiple timelines, and we can probably fix it, and Neville won't be dead. Who cares anyway? Neville's not in the play. I also have to talk about the last scene, because really, we get to it, and what is the point even?
Well, what?
Notwithstanding that this whole scene really does a bad job, I think, of wrapping up the story, but on top of that, it's such a lackluster ending. It's just Harry and Albus standing in a graveyard. It just felt like they were just like making up the lines. Like the lines just think that they're being poignant and deep, but to me they just felt so flat. The pigeon monologue is just, it's the worst. It's so much of a waste of time. Like, the play is just, in that scene, is kind of like desperately seeking for like, what is the meaning? Like, what did we just tell you? I don't know what the story is. And that doesn't really come across well when you have this big grandiose story and then the play just can't figure out what it wants to end with. Ginny_L, or Ginny on Twitter, asked what I think is actually a really good question to wrap up with, which is, do you wish you hadn't read the script before seeing the play, or wouldn't it have made a difference to your experience?
No!
You may not know everything about me, but I think you know enough to know what I like and don't like from what I've talked about on Alohomora. Cheap, stringy, tuggy emotion usually doesn't work for me. There's an interesting comparison that I can't help but bring up. The reason I want to bring it up is because I want to make sure that I'm being clear that if you enjoy Cursed Child, or if you go to it having not seen it yet and you do enjoy it, which I hope you do, if you do go to see it, because you're probably going to spend a lot of money on it no matter what you do, unless you get into through the Friday 40, is that I don't mind if you enjoy the play. These are all my personal views, and if you enjoyed it, good for you. I'm glad you got something more out of it than I did. But it kind of makes me think of when I saw the new Disney version of Beauty and the Beast. I was hyped up on emotion. I was super excited because I'd been waiting for years for this movie, and when I saw it the first time, there were things I had a lot of problems with it, but I actually ended up crying at the scene with the objects when they die, and I was shocked that I cried. I actually could not stop myself physically from crying during that scene. Looking back on it, I don't cry at that scene anymore because it's another one of those cheap emotional heartstring tuggy things, but I am not above being hit with those emotional beats from a story, even if they are cheap emotional beats. In the case of Beauty and the Beast, I think it worked for me because kind of like the problem that's going on with Cursed Child is that Beauty and the Beast did not know who its main characters were. Belle and the Beast, I think the filmmakers realized in the editing process, weren't interesting enough as main characters, so they transferred most of the screen time to the objects because they were more interesting and had more personality. And therefore, when they die, it's more affecting because honestly, when Emma Watson is crying over CGI Dan Stevens, I couldn't care less, which is sad because I love Emma Watson and Dan Stevens. But it's kind of the same thing with Cursed Child, where theoretically, maybe if I hadn't read it before, I might have cried the first time. I don't think I would have, though. For the most part, I was sitting there like this. And I'm pretty sure that's what my reaction would have been if I hadn't read the play already, because I've read so much Harry Potter fan fiction. I literally used to do a podcast where we read fan fiction aloud. I'm very familiar with tropes in Harry Potter fan fiction, and I feel like this met all of them. Literally the only one it doesn't do is commit to a LGBT relationship with Albus and Scorpius, which if it had, it would have kind of sealed the deal in many respects and been like, yep, this is definitely fan fiction, but also I would have liked it more if it had bothered to do that. Do I recommend you go see the play? If you can, and if it's financially able, if you don't have the means, don't go out of your way to see it, because there are other, I think, better things in the Potter fandom and in other fandoms that you should save your money for, or other experiences in life. But if someday you find you have money to do this, yes, go see it purely for the theatricality. If you get something out of the story, I would consider that a cherry on top, but the theatrics, yes, are amazing. While I was in New York, I had the pleasure of seeing other Broadway shows. One of our listeners who I mentioned earlier, Shauna Evans, went with me, her and her husband John, to see Puffs, which is running off Broadway, and was very amusing. I thought it was pretty much just basically the Harry Potter musical, but with Hufflepuffs, and no music. But it was fine. It was a lot of fun. It was very funny, and it even poked fun at Cursed Child. I saw that one first before Cursed Child, and it was very enjoyable and very impressive for an off-Broadway show. I know Shauna wanted me to let you know if it was better than Cursed Child. It's not really comparable because they're such completely different shows. They may both be about Harry Potter. I will say that Puffs has more easy to invest in original characters and better arcs for them. And I got to see Once on This Island, which won the Tony this year for Best Revival. And if you're in New York and you are looking for other shows to see, I highly recommend Once on This Island, because that is an example of a play slash musical that I think much better marries the acting and stagecraft and effects with the material to tell a complete story that Cursed Child fails to do. The neat thing about Once on This Island too is it's a lot easier to get into, which is almost sad because it should be sold out every night and it's not, and it's a theater in the round, so there's no bad seats. You're definitely gonna get a good seat. We went on a Tuesday night and there were still empty seats. You can actually get tickets for it at the tickets booth in Times Square. There's also another one I think farther north in New York City, but yeah, go get cheap tickets for Once on This Island if you're looking for things to see. That's not to say that Cursed Child isn't good theater in the respect that it's got great effects and as a whole experience it is amazing, but it really is kind of unaffordable for the general masses, and I don't like that. Do I think that you should go see it with the actors, like the original cast? No, there is no real value to that unless you want to watch Anthony Boyle scream at you for 5 hours. I have a feeling that many other people who come through and play these roles will do them justice in their own way and maybe even bring more to the table in some cases. But I think it's nice that these guys open the door for the other cast to do that. I just wish they had a better script that they were working with. Thank you so much, Alohomora listeners, for watching me talk about Cursed Child for way too long. I appreciate so much that you valued my opinion about this play and that you were so excited to hear what I had to say about it. If you are a Patreon sponsor, you are seeing this video about a month before we're gonna put it out to the public, so you got to hear my thoughts before everybody else. You're gonna get to hear more of my thoughts in conjunction with some of the other hosts, because we are going to do a host-only episode about Cursed Child now that we will have all seen it. Beth is the last one to see it. I believe she might actually be going with Allison, so enjoy the experience, ladies. Allison, I don't even have to wonder if you will. You definitely will. If you are a listener who is not a Patreon sponsor, first of all, feel free to join us on Patreon if you would like. It costs a lot less than going to get a ticket for Cursed Child. If you are seeing this video, it's probably because it was released the day of our new episode about Cursed Child. So if you're hoping to hear more about it and haven't listened to the episode, make sure and go do that over at alohomorepodcast.com. I look forward to all your guys' further thoughts about my feelings on Cursed Child, and if any of you have seen or are going to see the play soon, I can't wait to hear what y'all think about it, and I'll look forward to hearing more from you as we open the Dumbledore on Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Hashtag no more secrets. I also want to say hashtag break the curse, but I feel like this curse is like a little cloud above us forever, and we will never be rid of the curse of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
Guess the what? No!